you want to do it.
Yeah.
Later they can do it. Alright.
Keep going.
What was I saying? Oh yeah, ever since there was no retribution, so that was my normal mode last time. Yeah, which is just do things, don't do then stop all.
Is it like a childhood thing as well? Did you learn it from your childhood?
When I was growing up, I never had any responsibility.
Mm.
So I'm not sure. That's a good question. As a child, I've always been, maybe you're right. So as a child, I've always been doing things that I know I'm good at and that I can easily do without effort. Math was an example, physics was an example. I joined Kumon, I don't know if you know. I joined Kumon and it was so easy for me. To a point where I think after I went to a certain level, I asked my mom I don't want anymore because it's like waste of time.
Really?
Yeah. Easy I mean, it's just math. I mean, how to say, like, it's simple things. No, not simple things. It's stuff that makes sense to me.
Mm.
So I will just do it because of that.
Yeah.
And when I don't want to do it anymore, I'll stop. For one example, piano. I hated piano. Never became good at it. And I immediately, the moment I was young, I think 8 years old, I was already forcing my mom or asking my mom to stop the piano classes. So it's always been getting my way right? I didn't need to struggle through something and learn to love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Piano is an example, Kumon is an example. Tuition also, there was times where I go tuition, then I don't like it anymore, I skip tuition without telling anyone. Yeah, go tuition and then go to the class and then go out and go CC nearby. Yeah, that was my life. So it was same all the way in college until going to Malaysia and change.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that played a part in how your Christianity was as well, since you were a kid?
That's true. I think there was once when I was growing up as a Christian, it was a kind of a, what's a fad? Fad is like a trend, right?
A bit, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a fad for me at least to care about Christianity for a little while. Maybe when I was 10 to 12, go to youth camps and all those stuff. It'd be cool, meet a lot of friends, small groups, games, worship, but never lasted because it's all this fun stuff, but then there was no substance even in that camps also. But for me, I also didn't find any real lasting enjoyment in those things. It was like a fad, literally. After that period, then I just move on. After 13 onwards, I stopped going camp. Yeah. And funny enough, the camp eventually died also. I think they stopped camp also.
Right.
Yeah.
So how was your church background actually?
Yeah, so I grew up from day one, even as a kid going. Yeah. I'm pretty sure, my parents brought me as a baby to the church. Yeah, so I mean, my parents are Christian, and so when they brought me to the church early on, I grew up in a very charismatic church. More specifically, I grew up in a Pentecostal church. Yeah, and so I grew up there every week going to church, so I was a regular, but my attitude or my attentiveness in church is bare minimum. Early days I'll be playing phone, later days I'll be the age where it's weird to play phone, you know what I mean? When you reach a certain age you cannot play phone, look too kiddie, right? So that age I'll just sit there and mindlessly listen to it for 1 hour then go home. There was a lot of youth stuff going on, but I didn't care to join also. Because Christianity to me, I didn't really care for it. There was a lot of music, a lot of worship, a lot of good feels, good vibes, but it never really attracted me, even though I could play along with it, if that makes sense. Yeah, I could enjoy it if I wanted to, but when I didn't want to, I would just stop attending. Yeah, so I grew up there for a long time until I was 19. But early on I knew already, early teenage, I knew already that the only reason I'm going is because my mom forced me to go. Yeah, I don't really have friends there, or I didn't really care for what was being taught. I don't even remember the things that I learned there because I didn't care for it. And so I already knew that when I move out or eventually start working, I would leave church and just not be a Christian anymore, or maybe just Christian by name, fill up form Christianity or something like that, religion, right? Yeah, so that was my journey. So how I became Christian, so I would consider that period when I wasn't a Christian even though I was going to church, because I didn't know anything about the gospel, I didn't know anything about Jesus, I never read the Bible before. I never read the Bible before.
At all.
Oh, I think I tried reading Daniel because my name is Daniel. Yeah, so I tried reading the book of Daniel before, but it was so boring. Cause like I thought book of Daniel would be like, you know, about this brave guy going to the lion's den. Then I realized actually it's all this like weird stuff going on, like visions, all this and that, like whatever lah. It's like too complicated for me. So I never read the Bible before, and yeah, I was almost like done with Christianity. But how I became Christian was in what year was it? 2016.
Yeah.
So my first year of uni was when I went to Malaysia Christian Fellowship, and the only reason I went was not because I wanted to learn about Christianity or find God or whatever. It was more like because I want to make friends, because I know that Christian clubs sure got nice people and like Christianity obligated to be nice, something like that. So I went there, didn't think anything of it. I felt like it was a normal church service style, but it was only when I met this guy. His name is Manken. So he's on church, you know him, right?
Yeah.
And he, asked me after one Bible study. He said like, "Hey, you want to read Bible together?" And I thought like, okay, my version of read Bible together is sit down together and like read from a piece of paper with passages. That's like what I grew up with, right? That kind of Bible study, and like maximum 30 minutes. But little did I know, so I met him. And we met in the multi center in Monash, and like we sat down on the floor. Feels very like. Feels like some Korean drama thing. But we sat down on the floor and like he asked me to just read Romans 1 from verse 1 until the end of the chapter. And I don't know how it happened, but 5 hours passed, 6 hours passed. We were just reading Romans 1 and my mind was blown. It's like the first time I read the Bible, first time I realized like the Bible got sentences, like the Bible has a story. The Bible should be read like coherently. It's a letter written to people, actual people in the past. And so I was mind blown. I was enjoying all that, and that was my first experience, like learning what the gospel was from Romans 1. Learning what sin was, learning about Christ as the promised one, promised king, things like that. And since then, Mankan then invited me to his church, so CRC lah. And my first ever sermon was in 2016 or so. I remember very clearly. I don't remember the full name, but I remember clearly it's Top 32 of the spirituality series in 2016. It's some super long name. I remember the first minute of the sermon, Pastor Robin was just correcting that the name should be actually like, if you Google search like CRC spirituality series Top 32, you'll see like 7 lines worth of talk title. Yeah, but it was basically a sermon on Ephesians and Colossians, and that was my first time sitting there listening to that sermon. It was about 2 to 3 hours long, where I got super offended because in that sermon in Ephesians and Colossians, he was basically calling out this false spirituality that I grew up with. Yeah, so as I said earlier, like this worship, speaking in tongues, this like feeling God, he basically called it out with the scriptures. And I realized at that moment there, what CRC was all about and what the scriptures was all about. And God spoke through me through that sermon. And it was like, I would say that that's the moment I clearly remember, vividly remember, kind of like hearing God speak to me through the sermon. And that's the moment I realized that I didn't know the gospel. And that was the moment I realized that this is the gospel that what I'm hearing. And I was super offended because, he was basically calling out, attacking what I believed. But I also couldn't deny that it was true. And that was the moment I realized, like, even though I didn't like it, I needed to pay attention to this and believe it because it's clearly in the scripture. So that sermon itself, I was offended, right? I was offended but grateful. I don't know, it was this middle of like offended but grateful. Also, I'm an emotional guy, so like I couldn't just be like happy about it. I kind of stood up like Korean drama style and like left right after the sermon ended. I didn't leave in between because like I wanted to hear the whole thing. So I left right after the sermon ended, and then like Mankan was sitting next to me. I think you could tell throughout the whole sermon that like I was like offended. But I was still taking notes. This is the funniest thing. I was offended but still like listening. So it was a good offended, I guess. And I kind of left. I told Mankan like I need to leave already. Then I left. Then like he kind of chased me out. Then
Chase you out? Chase...
Oh, sorry, like he followed me and chased me.
Right.
Like he chased he chased me and talked to me and like asked me like, what's up, like, you okay? Like we were walking from like Central to my car, and I was telling him that I was super offended. I didn't like what Pastor Robin had to say. He was calling out and attacking what I believed, but at the same time, this stuff is real, and I'll definitely come back. I told him that, like that day I told him I'll definitely come back next week, and ever since then, 2016, I've been attending regularly CRC Sunday sermons, and quickly after that, also I attended like TGG Monsoon, because I was in Monash, and that was like the beginning of my Christianity, I would say. Yeah, I'm not sure if that was the moment, God like called me out from the darkness and brought me into the kingdom. Like I don't know if that was the moment, but that was the definite moment that I realized, CRC has the gospel, and not only has the gospel, but they taught me, they taught it bravely, boldly. I could see that if God, didn't cause me to see the truth, I would have just been offended and left. But it was also that same preaching that offended me, that God used to call me, and yeah, that was that moment that I became a Christian. So yeah.
Why do you think, despite being offended by the sermon, why do you think you still have the objectivity to keep coming?
Yeah, because I think the reason why I was offended, I guess was the reason why I was offended, and thinking about that was the basis of why I could rationalize and understand my emotions. Because there's two ways, right? It's either you're offended and then you blame the thing that offended you, or you're offended and you think, why did this offend me? And I thought about it during the sermon also, and I realized that the reason why I'm offended is because my belief system and my understanding of God and the world was based on what I had previously learned from my church. And it was that realization that I realized why I'm offended is not because of the preaching per se, but is that I didn't hear this before, or I didn't know this, and it was like I was taking it personally.
Yeah.
So in that way, then I realized that the truth was the only right basis that I should like cling on despite my feelings and things like that. And so yeah, even though I was offended, I knew that I'm offended because this is the truth, and whatever I knew was a lie. So I focused on like that kind of thinking, understanding, and came back on. Yeah, it wasn't easy of course. I'm not to say like it was like super easy, super rational, it makes a lot of sense. I still stood up and walked out because I couldn't handle being there. I was like verge of tears almost. Yeah, I think okay, it feels a bit embarrassing, but I think I cried when I took the monkey on the way to the car. It was like that moment of like this like too real or something, I don't know. Yeah, so emotional. Okay, but yeah, so it's not easy. It wasn't easy, but that was like kind of the thinking behind it.
Yeah.
That what happened. Yeah.
So what happened after that?
So after that I attended regularly to CRC. Started going to TGs more. Starting learning a lot more about the gospel, about how to read scriptures. Needing to be taught from church how to read properly, what's wrong way of reading it, and just learning and building up my foundations, my systematics, my doctrine, things that I had completely wrong understanding of the cross, God, the word, and that took a lot of time to unlearn and relearn a lot of good stuff. So that's what happened, and ever since 2016 all the way to today, so 2022, it's been a slow but constant growth. Yeah, where a lot of my sins exposed, and it's through the church and through my TG, that have this community of gospel-centric people that constantly calls out sin, constantly preaches the hard truth. The first day, my experience on first day until today is the same. I would say that that's very shocking. Normally, because growing up in church, even in 5 years, too many things change. But in CRC, okay, the look of CRC changed, and now we have more pastors and more elders. But the way we preach the truth, the concern we have is still the same. And that's part of the reason why I also want to commit to be a member in CRC. Because I not only have learned the gospel here, but also I've seen the gospel lived out in CRC. And I recognize, my life, I owe my life to God, and therefore I want to live that life in CRC to be part of this body. And I know I can grow here. I know I want to grow others here as well, and do mission work here lah. Yeah, because I can see how CRC is super important for blur people like me who grew up thinking that they knew about Christianity, knew about the gospel, but in fact we've never seen it from the scripture. Yeah, and like come here to like want to teach that thing also, so like I can slap the previous me's again, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You mentioned this now about a community, including GG and also
Yeah.
DG and this church life in general. But like, what kind of experiences have you really appreciated throughout your year of being here in GG and attending GG?
Yeah, so I think normally when you talk about GG or growth groups, you always think like going through the Bible, but there's something different in CRC, which is different in that it's different from the normal way I think most people would have done it in their previous church or their own churches. It's definitely different from the way we do it, or I did it in my previous church, which is there's an ultimate concern. It's not just going through the scripture to learn something, but it's going through the scripture to understand about God, and that flows back to therefore challenging us. So I think what's really different and what's the good experiences that I always had in DG is this constant need to conform your life to scripture. Yeah, I think it's easy to get knowledge of God from anywhere. Google search like John Piper or like Don Carson. You just like read books and you can get knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's super hard, I would say, in Malaysia to find a church that actually takes that knowledge and actually understands that we must conform our life to that knowledge. And so I think CRC really gets that, and every Saturday, every Sunday, you can see that like being breathed out in the way we talk to each other. Yeah, it's not very fun, like it's not like hype or like good vibes in that way, but it's great and sobering in that you grow as a Christian. Yeah, I would say like a worldly person would hate it. Yeah, like a person who loves the world would really hate this experience, because like there's no space to be, there's constantly no space to be like the way you want to be. There's only space and there's a lot of space only for a godly person to be in CRC. And I think that's a really important thing, a really important culture to have for a church, and it's something that I definitely see in CRC, and I'm the product of that. God has grown me through this to become the way I am. Yeah.
So how do you hope to continue doing ministry in the next few years?
Yeah, so ever since becoming a Christian in 2016 and then growing in church ever since then, I've been convicted to do full-time paid ministry for multiple reasons. One of it clearly is my own experience growing up and seeing the need of gospel preaching, faithful gospel preaching in Klang Valley in Malaysia. And so I want to be full-time paid minister for that. Also because I think since that 2016 experience and learning the gospel more, I vividly remember learning Luke from Mangkam, and Luke 9 specifically calling me to pick up my cross. And I saw that as a clear understanding from God that I should give up my whole life for this one task of preaching the gospel and teaching people. So that's what I'm aiming towards and I'm going for. Yeah. So ever since graduating and starting work, I've been trying to conform my life to making sure that I achieve that goal. It's hard, it's tough, but CRC has been super supportive and sharpening me to be thinking about it. And my GG leader also, Pastor Robin, he's been constantly like there to be a coach, to be a leader, to like show me how I'm failing to reach that goal, and also teaching me how to reach that goal and things like that. So he's someone that I definitely want to model after as a godly pastor who planted a church and produced so many leaders. So I also want to be that servant for God also.